The question is, what should the federal government be doing and where should they be looking in terms to break up these networks, to disrupt these operations, and ultimately to stop these activities from destroying our society like the cancer that it is?
I consider Antifa and U.S. government adjacencies to it to be part of the weaponization toolkit that the Biden administration used that spanned lawfare, FBI targeting, and the like. I consider paramilitary street violence and the condoning of it, or the tactical tacit blessings for it, to be a part of that weaponization toolkit. And Tulsi Gabbard at ODNI just stood up a interagency working group on weaponization of intelligence and foreign affairs type functions. This spans ODNI, CIA, State Department, USAID, FBI, DHS, and other equities. I believe that, for example, search terms can be inputted into internal searches at USAID, the State Department, the Central Intelligence Agency, and you can start right there and simply put in terms like Antifa or anti-fascist or authoritarian in these type terms, and start with a basic review of all files around, for example, energy policy in Germany. The Biden administration blew up the Nord Stream pipelines. The Antifa groups in Germany were champing at the bit for that and have been used as a battering ram against the AfD party there. We were giving tens of millions of dollars in aid to various organizations within Germany. You can start right there and simply look for all Antifa adjacencies blessed by the foreign policy establishment, or used or even had peripheral awareness by CIA, State Department, USAID, with Antifa networks that were going against those agencies' political enemies. I think it is impossible that there are no linkages there. You start with that, and you make it sunlight, the best disinfectant. These networks rely on secrecy. Now, what you'll hear from the national security state is, oh, you can't disclose the involvement of the U.S. government and Antifa in Germany because then no other dissident group will want to work with the United States, knowing that their cover will be blown because the U.S. government betrayed these Antifa groups by disclosing internal memos and conversations with various leaders on the ground. I say that is complete BS. If you use this as a sword abroad, for example, if you use Antifa networks to go after the AfD party in Germany or Marine Le Pen's movement in France, you can't use that secrecy as a shield at home because Antifa operates here at home. So I think it starts with taking the lid off of the den of vipers, the cage that they've been with classification, and simply exposing the snakes inside to sunlight. Given how the layers of secrecy and OPSEC that Antifa moves through, that itself will have a tremendous on-the-ground impact in those countries themselves, potentially violating FARA-type laws. And if these were not disclosed in accordance with each country's process. For example, we know that Syria units were, according to Rolling Stone, the closest allies on the ground of the U.S. military in Syria, as we were backing the ISIS and al-Qaeda forces against Bashar al-Assad. We know, because the military was working directly with these Antifa units, we know that there is connective tissue between the U.S. military, the Central Intelligence Agency, and Antifa in Syria. Does anyone doubt those linkages in Germany or France or in other European and Latin American countries? If you do,
and Mike, by the way, those linkages that you're talking about, the foreign fighter flows that we saw traveling to YPG and other affiliates, it wasn't just American Antifa that were coming. They were sourcing them from Germany. They were sourcing them from Greece. They were using that area of northeastern Syria as a training ground for Antifa to receive battlefield experience. And in fact, I know of at least one individual who received that battlefield training and then traveled back to in 2019, then traveled back to the United States to participate in what? The Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, where he was manning the armed barricades in Chaz in Seattle just a year later.
That's right. They go straight from targeting the CIA's enemies abroad to the CIA's political enemies here at home. That's how this international network works, and the capacity building for it moves through foundations. And this is really the layer that I think would break this whole thing open. You take a place like the Tide Center. The Tide Center, which gives the 501c3 to the Black Lives Matter Global Action Group and to many of these Antifa funding pass-throughs. The Tide Center, as I've documented, has gotten about $27 million in U.S. State Department and USAID grants for some very peculiar things, including the Tide Center getting a $2.5 million grant to, quote, secure concrete commitments from foreign governments on behalf of the U.S. State Department. And this is the group that is giving the 501c3 to a nonprofit status, the fiscal sponsor to these Antifa groups and these BLM street muscle groups in 2020.